Hello, this is Chris Riley with Cutwater Advisory Partners. This video is for business owners and their advisors because it is very difficult to understand exactly what we do to increase the enterprise value of an exit over a short period of time, 12 to 18 months, in the 20, 30, 40% range. So here's a case study that would outline how we do it and why we're so effective at getting a value up significantly above if you just go the traditional investment banking and business broker route, which is very efficient, very effective, but this is outside the box. So here is a Microsoft Azure migration technology firm. And what it does, in essence, is does a project. It analyzes all of the data and the activities of a company, and then it migrates all of it to the cloud, in this case, Microsoft Azure. And then they manage that over time. Okay, so that's what this company did. And of course, that's very valuable. This was a few years ago. And so the owner had offers coming in at around $15 million. All these private equity groups and investment bankers and business brokers, they call the business owner and they say, hey, I think we've got a buyer for your company. We'd like to make an offer. Are you interested in selling? There's thousands of these calls that happen every single day. And it's very enticing. Business owners that are ready to start winding down their career are very interested in these phone calls. So in this instance, they got a call and they even quoted the number. They're like, I think we could probably get, in the range of $15 million based on what we see you're doing and so forth and so on. So one of the partners, was very connected to me and said, you know what, I think we need Chris to come in here and take a look at this. I don't know if we can just sell. We have to kind of take a look at this, because he knew what I did and didn't understand it fully, but he knew that there was something more there. They had brought in a group to try and boost revenues. That did not work. Unfortunately, it reduced revenue growth. So they were kind of in a little bit of a downward trend. And so that was going to add another discount, possibly even lower than 15 million, but who knows? And so I went in and just said, I don't think so. I think there's so much more here based on what I see. Let's polish some things up and let me make some phone calls and just see what the prevailing wind is in this industry. So we paused the sale and I went to work and I put my team on it, and we looked at a few things that were very interesting that were going to create significant discounts when the auction came. Because the way investment banking works is they package it up, they do a fabulous job, and we use them all the time. And, we don't want to do it ourselves. I did this for 10 years. And so I know how it's supposed to be done, and I know the ones that do it really well. But you have an as-is business when they're packaging that up. And then they send the packet out and the teaser's out, and they look at it for 3 to 5 minutes, and then they're either interested or they're not, and they throw an offer in, and then they go to due diligence. That's how it works. You're locked in to that as-is price. And so when I looked at this business, I saw a couple of interesting things. The first thing that I saw was in blue here, these were the revenues for all of these customers. All of these are their customers. And in each row, here is a project that they did. And then they did the project and analyzed it and set it up. And then they immediately went into a subscription agreement where they were going to manage that over time. Well, that's the same customer. Well, they didn't have it recorded that way. They had it as a separate customer. So their recurring revenues were down in the 67, 68% range. When I repackaged this and put it by customer, the recurring revenues were up in the 90% range. So once we put that recurring revenue into the 90% range, that raised eyebrows, of course, or would, when the buyers come to town. So that was one thing that we did. We didn't have to go into the company at all and do anything. We just repackaged it that way. A few other things that we looked at. One was their financial statements had their EBITDA number and their net operating income much, much lower than it really was because of various expenses that didn't relate to the specific Microsoft Azure migration company. All business owners usually have it. There are extenuating circumstances. There are EBITDA adjustments that happen all the time. So what we do is we pull all of those expenses out, and we only show the financial statements for the net operating income. And then we pull everything below into what's called the corporate office. And so that corporate office survives the transaction and all those expenses. So the net operating income can then be reclassed and reset for the last 2 or 3 years to show the proper EBITDA. So when the private equity groups or the folks that are looking at the business, when they get the teaser, they don't have to go through all those EBITDA adjustments. That knocks out half of the bidders. They see all those EBITDA adjustments and they're like, no, that's just too much for me. I don't think we're just going to go with the original EBITDA. So the other thing was, I went and looked up here in C and green. I looked at all of the other technology services and products that the customers normally would be buying, but they're buying them from another company, not from this company. And so you would say, well, yeah, so why is that relevant? Well, when I looked at the average of what all of those companies would be spending, I went ahead and took 12.5% of capturing that revenue over a 36-month period. Why would I do that? Because these are private equity groups that are going to be buying this company. The private equity group may very well have portfolio companies that would buy those services. So it's a warm lead. Once they buy the company, they can just go to the clients, their clients, and say, hey, we offer all these other services. We can package all of this up in a one-stop shop. Would you be interested in a bid? So I did that, and I looked at that, and I ran it out 36 months, and I took the present value. So then we have that all ready to go. Those were the primary things that I did. It took about 4 to 6 months of really digging in and looking at that. Then I went to my investment bank, top investment bank in New York, does telecommunications, technology, and they then went to work. We engaged. They went to work. They packaged everything that I had already done into their excellent process and the way that they work. But now I was available with the ownership to talk to these private equity groups and explain what this cross-selling matrix actually was. So when it came time to bid, I then looked at all of these and I found several private equity groups that were already interested in this company, at buying the company, that had companies in their portfolio that sold all of these other services up here in C. And so it was a very easy handoff. Hey, guys, if you buy this company, not only do you get the profits and the revenues of this company, but now you get warm leads in order to build your other portfolio companies. So in green were all of these companies that they owned that sold those services. So that bumped another 20% on top of the value. And so in the end, we sold the company for $32.5 million. And it was 14, 15 months later. And we didn't even do things inside the company per se. We did start focusing on the transition. The integration planning and the transition is very important. So the handoffs from the sales group from this Microsoft Azure to the sales folks of the private equity portfolio companies is important. And so we set all that up. But what we're doing and what Cutwater Advisory Partners does is it thinks like the buyer and it says, what would I want in this company if I was going to buy it at a premium? Why would I pay a premium? So that's what we do. We go to these private equity groups and we ask them, what would you like to see? Oh, well, we want recurring revenues about this, and we would like to see, a diverse, service, whatever it is, because they know they're very focused on what their fund and what their portfolios need to look like. So that's what we do. When it comes time for the final push, then we get the investment bankers, and I lead that process to ensure that it's going on the timing and the numbers that it looks like. But the first thing we have to do is approve it canvas, and that's our kind of proprietary analysis that says how much upside could there be if we made some of these changes. And we're also contacting private equity groups and some investment bankers just to see, is there a potential for a higher value? If there really isn't, if there isn't much there, we don't engage. So we're not selling our services. We're actually seeking companies that have an upside that we can monetize. And if we don't monetize the upside, we don't get paid. It's on a percentage of the upside. So that's what we do. We don't do hundreds and hundreds of deals. We're very focused on looking for the highest upside. But the Prove It Canvas is a very small fee, and it gives the entire roadmap. We actually build a Gantt chart all the way to exit on what we think is going to happen. Then we engage, and the second step is we go and we run that. And we make primarily most of our compensation when the transaction closes. And so it's kind of baked in insurance that if we don't actually increase it, well, then we don't get a lot of money. And so that's how we work. That's in general how we work. And so what we have to do is we spend 3 to 4 weeks on this Prove It Canvas to find that upside value or that potential. And then we fully engage to go build it and sell it. It's very seamless. You don't have customers and employees and competitors knowing that you're selling. You're growing because the company that's going to buy our client wants to grow it even further. And so they get it on the way up. And that's the best way to sell a business. After 30 years of being a business owner, buying, selling, learning my lessons, seeing what happened when other people bought our businesses, now we've got it baked in. So we look forward to looking at your business or your clients' businesses just to see what that upside is. And it's a good idea for everybody to do this Prove It Canvas, regardless of whether you hire us or someone else, to look at that to see if there is a legitimate upside potential. So thanks for listening. Hope to see you on the other side as I say it. Cutwater Advisory Partners is the name of our company. Cutwateradvisory.com is our website. Thank you.